Where we are at now in terms of obstacles is exactly right because we haven't figured out the overarching framework for system level or application level testing. We're still, you know, kind of tinkering around as the car is being built.
This is Privacy on the Ground, where privacy meets real life. Policy for governing AI is one thing, but what's it like to help put AI governance goals into practice? How is governance guidance or policy turned into something that's actually usable? In Singapore, April Chin has been working on that very thing. If you heard the first episode of this series on Singapore's influential AI Verify program, you got a chance to meet her. April Chin is co-CEO of Razaro. They're a company that provides a modular testing platform for evaluation of AI used in high-risk areas. Think AI systems used in defense or deep fake detection. My name is Kate Kay. I'm World Privacy Forum's Deputy Director, and in this second episode of our Privacy on the Ground AI Verify series, you'll hear my full interview with Chin. AI Verify, it's kind of a hybrid approach to AI governance. Part AI governance tech provider, part guidance and policy sandbox, and part community. And it's that community of people from companies building, deploying, and assessing AI that really makes it unique. Razaro is part of that community, but the company plays an important role as one of 9 invite-only premier AI Verify members. The small group includes other tech companies along with Singapore's media regulatory body, Infocom Media Development Authority, or IMDA. As part of its ongoing involvement with AI Verify, Razaro has worked on a variety of projects. The company's helped with AI Verify's toolkit for testing financial AI applications. And its data scientists and engineers have contributed to AI Verify's open source testing toolkits and test packages. You know, it's not often we get a peek into how AI governance initiatives happen in real life or their challenges. And this talk with April Chin gets us a bit closer. Even if you know a bit about the AI Verify program, if you haven't already, I encourage you to listen to the first episode of this series. You'll get important context for this in-depth chat with Chin. In our interview, recorded in November 2025, we talked about the evolution of AI Verify, the methods and approaches the organization has developed and piloted, and the obstacles that external auditors like Razaro might face when it comes to accessing important components of AI systems needed for meaningful assessment. And we got a chance to discuss key AI Verify projects she's been involved with, including one of the most recent efforts, the Global AI Assurance Pilot. That project brought together several companies that use generative AI with companies that offer testing and assessment software or services to conduct Gen AI application testing, including Razaro. We kicked off our talk with a discussion of AI Verify's implementation-focused approach to policy. It's one that actually reflects Singapore's approach to governance more broadly. So, when it first launched as an international pilot in 2022, the AI Verify approach, I really saw it as something really quite different from the more procedural guidance type approaches that we saw from other governments and NGOs at the time. AI Verify was literally developing software tools, right? They were putting out things like open source plugin tools for measuring AI robustness and fairness and explainability. Since then, they've moved on from what they call traditional AI to producing tools for measuring LLMs and testing generative AI systems. And when you and I first spoke, you told me about your background working for the Singapore government in policy and administration. And something you said really struck me. You said that inside government in Singapore, there's something that people say often: policy is implementation.
Yeah.
At World Privacy Forum, we think of AI Verify as an example of that, the implementation layer of policy. Like I said, for the past few years, we've been researching a variety of AI governance tools and how organizations use those tools. And we think of them as that implementation layer of AI governance and policy, or the tools that put AI governance into practice. And AI Verify is an example of one of those. So, on to my question for you. How do you see that implementation is policy approach reflected in AI Verify efforts that you've been involved with? And does that approach contrast with other more traditional approaches to governing AI that you've encountered?
Yeah, thanks, Kate, for that question. Indeed, policy is implementation from the perspective that at the end of the day, if you want to govern and lead well, you need to be able to communicate and influence in a way that leads to real outcomes, right? So that's I think the sort of fundamental um, paradigm behind why we always say policy is implementation. And in particular, when it comes to governance, first of all, clear thinking must be translated into clear writing. And I think certainly in the AI governance space, we have seen a lot of well written AI governance frameworks and publications that increasingly give a more granular understanding of what we would like to see in trustworthy AI, what could be the ways of implementing it, and so on. However, at the end of the day, while clear writing is clear thinking, I think clear thinking must also translate into clear action. And that is where, for me, AI Verify comes in as a foundation to hold the space for the developer community, for industry, for other stakeholders like academia as well to collaborate and really get into the nuts and bolts of what implementing AI governance in action will look like. And that is so important because at the end of the day, I think I learned in my own experience, right, translating AI governance frameworks into testing frameworks that it has to be something that data scientists and engineers can implement, can write in code, can understand when they're looking at, the different metrics and thresholds as a result of tests that they run.
So, can you tell me a little bit about just how would you compare or contrast AI Verify from other types of AI governance tools, or like procedures and things that you've seen out there? I mean, do you think of it as more of a clear, kind of technically implementable thing than other approaches?
Yeah. If we look at the continuum of governance or what we call AI assurance activities, right? On one hand, you do have procedural activities around looking at your quality management systems, whether your structures and processes, roles and responsibilities have been set up well. You may also have self-impact assessments. You may have a second line of defense, right? Internal audit teams coming in to check. But when towards the other end of the spectrum, then it gets more technical, right? It's actually asking ourselves, how do I look under the hood of the AI system and understand what it's actually doing and verifying that it's not doing what it's not supposed to do. So I see AI Verify as sitting on this other side of the spectrum where it's inspecting the AI application to look at what it's giving out in terms of its outputs or predictions and checking, right, that it's behaving as it should, giving that confidence through technical testing.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Rosaro. You're co-CEO of the company. Just from my brief review of the website, you're conducting evaluations of AI systems. Of course, I also am familiar with the work that you've done with AI Verify, which we'll talk about. The company conducts evaluations of AI systems and offers a testing platform and various testing modules. And the name Rosaro has an interesting connection of three words: responsible, safe, and robust.
That's right.
But yeah, so before we talk about some of the AI Verify projects Rosaro has been involved in, can you tell me a little bit about the company and your role?
Yeah, sure. I'm co-CEO of Rosaro together with Ollie Salzman, who's my other co-CEO based in Germany. And together, Rosaro is co-headquartered in Singapore and Germany. We are an AI assurance company that provides our customers who are using AI in mission critical or high risk areas the ability to test, evaluate, validate, and verify their AI solutions. And we do this through our modular testing platform that allows them to test and validate across different types of AI domains from computer vision, LLM, agentic, and so on. That also includes the ability to generate your own multimodal synthetic data, because at the end of the day, you will need a very robust data set to assess, right, the quality of your AI system. One conviction that we have in this space is the alignment of expectations between three stakeholders is extremely important to build confidence for real world AI deployment. And these three stakeholders are the business or the operator persona, right? This would typically be the stakeholder that best understands the use case, the intended value that they want to get out of the AI application. And then you have the governance stakeholder, as well as the engineering stakeholder. And today, we may all speak English, but actually, the worldviews, the paradigms, the taxonomies, the lingo, right, can be very different between these three stakeholders. That often is also a function of different KPIs and risk appetites that they have structurally within their organization.
Mm.
What we want to see is the AI market being worthy of trust, right? And one that is flourishing. And so we want to solve this critical pain point by helping them define the quality of AI applications, be able to then test and validate against it, and then confidently deploy AI into the real world and enjoy the benefits of it within the right guardrails.
So you mentioned that your focus is on mission critical and high risk systems. What are some examples?
So some examples will be in defense, right? Whether it's the use of AI in drone systems or in deepfake detectors
Mm.
to detect misinformation threats, or in public safety, right? The use of LMs to support policing or in healthcare, right? The use of AI to complement um, clinical decision making. One example is in the space of radiology, where AI is increasingly good at reading different types of medical images, but the actual performance in the clinical context can still vary. And that's where we come in to provide the evidence, right, of the real world performance, safety, and security of these applications.
Hmm. And just briefly, I believe that when we spoke the last time, you told me that your background is not technical, right? You're more you come out of government policy work, and so you're more on the business side of Rosaro.
That's right. Yes. I lead the business in Rosaro. I often also am the bridge between the technical team and non-technical customers. I myself, having spent some time in the AI governance space, have also worked with various technical stakeholders to translate lofty, descriptions of governance principles like transparency and explainability into technical tests and metrics. And it's honestly still a very fascinating process for me that I really hope we can solve in Rosaro.
You mean the translation
That's right.
challenge? Yeah.
Yes.
So I definitely want to dig into how Rosaro has been involved with AI Verify, but if you don't mind, I just want to give a little overview of some of the recent interrelated AI Verify projects that we've seen
Yeah.
happening over the past year or so. Things that address evaluation of LLM based and generative AI systems in particular. So there was a set of voluntary guidelines for testing LLM systems called a starter kit
Mhm.
that provided detailed guidance on evaluating risks of hallucination, undesirable content, data disclosure, vulnerability to adversarial prompts. So that AI Verify starter kit includes some detailed recommendations of specific metrics and benchmarks to test things like factual inaccuracies, as well as to gauge undesirable content and toxicity according to specific Singapore related cultural and legal situations and in relation to languages used in Singapore. Um, and there are some connected tools to that starter kit. There's an open source LLM measurement tool called Project Moonshot that people can look for on GitHub. It works as a way to kind of implement that starter kit for testing LLM based apps. And there was another related AI Verify project that we might focus on a little bit in our talk, the AI Assurance Sandbox. And that AI Assurance Sandbox, it took the previous work further. This is kind of my quick overview of what it did. AI Verify sort of was incubating this young ecosystem of entities that were deploying and evaluating generative AI systems. So they brought together companies that use generative AI and
Mhm.
with other companies that offer software or services to test generative AI applications like Rosaro. And there were companies from all over the world, really. It seemed like most of them were from Singapore, but there were some from Canada, France, Germany, Hong Kong, Switzerland, Taiwan, the UK, and the US. Um, so the idea was to pair up those evaluators with the developers and users of Gen AI systems to
Yes.
conduct testing. And Rosaro worked on two of those projects. One was to test an anti-money laundering AI assistant from Tukataki, and another was to test a system that is not exactly explained in too much detail from MSD The in people in the US or other parts of the world, I think, might know that company as the pharma company that we call Merck here. Um, so can you talk about the types of AI systems that Rosaro assessed as part of that AI Verify AI assurance pilot? And maybe a bit about how the partner companies use those systems that you were evaluating?
So Rizaro was involved in various projects from the beginning, which is the generative AI sandbox, and then most recently this year, the global AI assurance pilot. And I think first of all, it's been wonderful being part of this ecosystem. I think where we are trying to build new capabilities and awareness, having a stakeholder to bring together the right ingredients to kickstart that knowledge discovery has been critical. And I think the right ingredients here really is the matchmaking between the enterprise with the use case or the AI solution provider together with the third party tester, as well as the mm, draft guidance, right, from the regulator.
So, before we continue with the interview, I'll jump in here and give a bit more background regarding one of the global AI assurance pilot projects Chin and I discussed. Her companies work with Tukataki. They make AI based anti money laundering software that companies use to comply with financial regulations. The software generates reports and has a chatbot that assists investigators in accessing relevant information. The AI Verify process, it didn't require the companies to produce detailed assessment reports or information about alterations that might have been made as a result of evaluation. But there's a case study published by AI Verify that gives a glimpse into the test design and implementation process. And it gives details like costs of testing. According to the case study, Rizzaro evaluated the accuracy, reliability, and security of Tukataki's system as it was deployed inside Tukataki's internal quality assurance environment. For instance, they checked whether outputs accurately represent facts like alert reasons and risk indicators, and whether outputs adhere to financial regulations and internal compliance guidelines. They also assessed if the system blocked requests from nefarious users that wanted to gain unauthorized database access or grab customers' personal information. The case study also mentions some challenges in the assessment process. For instance, assessors had difficulty extracting data from generated responses to compare it to ground truth data. And because there was no actual client production data available, it was also difficult to generate test data sets that were realistic and representative of some less common things the system would need to be able to handle. Okay, back to my interview with April Chin.
One example will be in the space of anti-money laundering fraud detection. We worked with Tukitaki, which is a vendor providing this solution to a lot of major banks. They have already built their application that involves the use of LM to analyze the data, to provide some recommendations and guidance to bank officers who are reviewing the signals of potential AML activities. However, they felt that it would be helpful, right, to have an additional lens to further challenge the application that they have built. And what one of the key things that we did was really um, generate a synthetic test set to broaden the scenarios or the boundaries of testing. Similar to that, I think in our other projects, right, we've had enterprises come to us saying, hey, we have built this, we want to launch it publicly as an application that would potentially benefit our customers, but you know, with potential benefits also comes potential risk. So can Rosaro come in again to provide a deeper dive into what might be our blind spots in this area. So another example that we worked on was with Singapore Airlines. They had launched a search engine tool on their website that is powered by LM as well, and you can already use it today. And some interesting insights really is in figuring out what is the enterprise definition of accuracy, right? And what might be the tone and the standards for customer service in terms of the length of response time, how many turns would it take for the customer to be able to get to the so-called right answer. And I think these are real questions that business stakeholders care about, right? And the assurance sandbox and activities have really provided that platform for us to get much closer to these real world use cases and be able to put ourselves in the shoes of our customers to understand what are their pain points, what are their needs, and how can this testing and validation process help them with their AI adoption journey.
So the Singapore Airlines project, was that through the AI Assurance Sandbox project, or was
No,
it through something else?
that was the in the precursor, the generative AI sandbox.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
The global AI assurance pilot was a sort of concerted first specific event that matchmaked, I think you mentioned 16 or 17 companies with testers. But prior to that, um, the IMDA had already launched the sandbox.
Right, right. Yeah, I might have my terminology wrong. It was the AI Assurance Pilot, and they had a
Yeah,
sandbox. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I guess I'm curious if what you've for example, the projects that you worked on through that AI Assurance Pilot, how did they differ from maybe your approach or just the process, that you would take if you're working with another client in more of a typical client partnership? Were there things that you would point to that are different because it was under the auspices of AI Verify?
No, I don't think there are any fundamental differences. I think how I see it is the global AI assurance global AI assurance pilot um, provided the avenue to iteratively figure out what would be meaningful ways to do baseline and component testing, right? I'm using the language from the starter kit that IMDA published. And I would say then when it comes to our client projects or the use of our approved intelligence platform, then a lot of the testing and validation work goes much deeper into either specific components or additional dimensions of testing, and definitely testing in the context of their AI deployment, right? Whether it's within a military use case or in a clinic where the AI model is being deployed on a radiology equipment.
So just to clarify, I may have misunderstood, but are you saying that when you're working in more of a client relationship, the assessment might go a little deeper or into different
Yes,
areas? Yeah. Okay.
yes, that's right. Yeah.
Mhm. So I mean, I'm curious to know what kinds of people at Rosaro have been involved in AI Verify projects and actually implementing them, like, day to day, what types of roles or positions those people might have.
So Rosaro is a premium member of the AI Verify Foundation, and over the last 2 years, we have been contributing to the open source testing toolkits, and these have been done by our data scientists as well as our engineers, contributing test packages and enhancements to the toolkit. For example, one significant contribution we made this year was merging the Monetary Authority of Singapore's toolkit for testing financial AI applications, right? That's the Veritas toolkit together with the AI Verify toolkit. So in Singapore now, basically you can go to AI Verify and be able to access both as open source testing toolkits to be used.
Okay, that's interesting. So you had to sort of map them or connect them in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah, we in our World Privacy Forum's risky analysis report, which came out about 2 years ago now, um, where AI Verify is featured, but also that Veritas work the IMDA Veritas financial services related work is
Mm.
reviewed there too. So uh, when AI Verify introduced its global AI assurance pilot, they stated that a shift was required. They said the pilot represents a shift from the safety of foundation models to the reliability of the end to end systems or applications in which they are embedded. So, the applications or systems in which the models are embedded. Um, but doing a system level assessment seems like a very different process and requires a lot more access sometimes, I imagine, than inspecting just a model. So, I imagine system level assessments would require access to a company's internal data flows, possibly, or technical components and other aspects of a system that companies operating those systems may be sometimes reluctant to make available. Has that posed any obstacles to assessors like Rosaro when it comes to accessing the system level information that AI verifies asking you to look at?
So, first of all, I think I want to affirm that it's a very positive sign of maturity that we are now looking at the continuum of the safety of foundation models as well as the reliability of the application. Right. And I often like to use the car analogy here. If the foundation model is the engine, as powerful and as important the car engine is, at the end of the day, when you go to a car dealer to buy a car, you're not just asking to test the engine, right? You want to sit in the car, drive it, test the music, the aircon, the seatbelts, and so
Mhm.
on. And I think that is the progression we will need to make in the AI industry. And where we are at now in terms of obstacles, is exactly right because we haven't figured out the overarching framework for system level or application level testing. We're still, you know, kind of tinkering around as the car is being built, right? If I kind of poke this part of the car, is that going to be meaningful? And likewise, on the other side, the manufacturer or the developer of the AI system, it has valid concerns, right? If I review this to you, is that going to be IP leakage and so on? I don't think these obstacles are necessarily a reflection of the the meaningfulness of the process, right? Meaning that over time, I'm confident that we will be able to figure out a meaningful exchange of information between deployers and testers so that system level assessments can provide enough confidence on the performance of the AI application. Today, do we face obstacles? Definitely, right? For example, mm, if we don't have a seed test data set that reflects the ground truth, um, that often makes it very hard to determine what the end user should expect of the accuracy or the trade-offs, right, between false positive and false negative. Um, increasingly with agentic systems, right, where you have to test the internal logic, being able to access those different modules will become necessary. And I think this is why there is a role for AI assurance providers as third parties, independent and not competing with AI solution providers, to play a role here where we are able to say, I'm not here to compete with you in selling solutions, right? I'm here to either help you with building confidence in your solution as you go to market, or I'm here to help you as the buyer to provide you with the ability to understand these AI applications before you buy or before you deploy.
Did you get a sense that those kinds of obstacles are there for other assessors that were part of the AI Verify AI Assurance pilot,
Definitely.
for example? Yeah. So, like, and you're
Yeah.
describing both technical challenges and obstacles as well as those access issues, the concerns that a company has about leaking sensitive intellectual property, or
Sometimes
just
it's also just organizational structures, right? I mean, this was also openly shared in the different AI assurance pilot use cases and the reflections from the third party testers. But in big organizations, information can reside in different teams. Decisions have been made in a different point in time. Um, Different stakeholders have different levels of authority for making decisions, and these are not unique to sort of the AI world, but it's the reality whenever, as a so-called outside party, you need to have more access
Mm.
to internal information. It's what the cybersecurity world had to go through 10, 15 years ago, but today it's already mainstream, right? That you need to do VAPT testing, you need to do pen testing, and as part of that, you have to provide this amount of information. And I
Mm.
do think that we will get there eventually
Mm.
in the AI world.
So there could be some lessons to learn from the cybersecurity industry a little bit.
Definitely, and I would say also a lot of the safety critical industries,
Sure.
right? Like
Yes.
aviation and so on.
Yeah, I think on the policy side, there's always talk about, you know, assessment of a drug before it goes to the market, or
Mm,
the chemical industry, all
yeah.
of the processes that have to happen before something is
Yes.
released onto the
Yes.
world.
Yeah. Where
Um,
we do want to be careful though is not to introduce these toll gates and requirements too early, right?
mm,
Because where there is a need to experiment with AI, then actually the approach should be to ring fence, provide the sandbox, provide the guardrails, but within that, allow the developer and those stakeholders to go wild and test it and innovate.
yeah,
And
and
so I think it's important to make the distinction um, between experimentation and sort of the real world reliability requirements.
right, and do you mean that in the context of the actual policy as well as the systems
Yes,
themselves?
yes.
Mhm. Uh, so this was kind of interesting to me that AI in the AI assurance pilot, AI Verify, some of the documentation about it, they made a point of saying that they did not seek access to the actual results of the technical tests.
Mm,
Rather, they said the focus of the AI assurance pilot was on understanding the deployer's risk assessment, the design and implementation of technical tests against those risks, and the lessons learned from the exercise. And I was just curious to know what you think of that approach. And, you know, should deployers have to provide some access to some results of technical tests to AI Verify is kind of a governing body, or the overseeing mechanism there, or I mean, should they have to provide
yeah.
some kind of information about results of the testing?
So first of all, AI Verify Foundation is an open source foundation, right? They're not the regulator,
Right.
and so from that first principle, they don't need to receive actual reports to regulate. But what I'm really glad they recognized was like what I mentioned in the market and industry together today, the range of AI applications still spans a very wide spectrum from research translational type of projects to experiments to POCs to small scale deployment, uh, and some right at the large scale deployment stage. Given this spectrum of AI use cases and applications, I think the way to then incentivize enterprises, solution providers to come on board was to first focus on the process, not the results, right? And the goal is to build understanding, build shared knowledge and capability around the process of AI assurance, not the documentation of, you know, the results of different AI applications in the industry. And at the end of the day, nobody wants their AI application to perform poorly, right? So I think not having the requirement to submit actual results of the technical test also provides the necessary room for enterprises and solution providers to decide what to do with that information.
Mm. Uh, can you talk a little bit about how you've seen AI Verify influencing actual policy and regulations in Singapore? Or vice versa, how regulatory guidance has led to maybe in a project at AI Verify? How do those things connect?
I think what AI Verify has done is really provide a lot of concrete examples, as a lighthouse in this AI governance landscape on what could be ways to actually implement AI governance. Mm. And I do think that they've made a lot of good strides towards, for example, the mapping AI Verify framework against the NIST AI risk management framework to ensure interoperability across both frameworks. That is extremely important when it comes to making sure that policy and regulation translate into meaningful outcomes for the economy and businesses. We should never kind of think of policy and regulation as distinct and separate from the economy and the world that businesses need to live in, which is to build, buy, and sell their goods and services. And I think a lot of the AI Verify's work is really providing those building blocks, early examples of how we can create an AI market that allows for responsible innovation.
It's been really interesting as an observer here in the US, just kind of watching AI Verify from afar through online things, through documentation, talking to some people here and there when I can manage to do that. And it's evolved a lot since I started looking at it, for our risky analysis report when it was really just some software tools that were oriented around what AI Verify considers traditional AI. Now moving towards LLMs, generative AI, and now there's discussions around agentic AI. Beyond just the types of systems that AI Verify has addressed, are there other ways that you've seen the organization evolve? I mean, I've kind of looked at it and thought, okay, wow, this is becoming a community of, I mean, it's almost like you kind of talked about this a little bit. It feels like a community of different people from different disciplines who are coming together and working together. So it has this kind of workshopping community
Mm.
networking organization quality to it, which I'm not really sure if it did in the beginning. Maybe it did. I don't know.
I guess if you think about it from the network perspective, um, initially AI Verify was a thought leader, right? Putting out sort of more technical guidance and the early innings of, the open source testing tool. And certainly over time with the community membership and a lot of very meaningful knowledge sharing activities, I would say AI Verify has grown to become an important node within this AI governance network, right? Amongst the industry, for example, it's pretty well known by now that you will look to the AI Verify framework to provide you with an initial understanding of what baseline testing is, what could be the steps to take, what might be examples to see how others have done it. And this is an incredible resource because back to what we said at the beginning, right? Policy is implementation, and if people don't know how to action on AI governance, then we're not going to be able to see the positive outcomes that we expect out of governance.
I've been curious. I mean, maybe it's obvious to people, but there seems like a shift, a pretty dramatic shift in AI governance and policy, the language of it, and the goals away from a focus on fairness and explainability toward things like performance, safety, security, accuracy, prevention of misuse. I mean, I see it as probably just a reflection of how AI systems have evolved and what we can look at. But I mean, it's interesting not to. I'm just not really seeing the word fairness talked about the way it used to be 5 years ago. Let's say. What do you what do you think about that? Do you see that shift?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I think we can look at it from a few ways, right? One is from a taxonomy perspective. I don't think we have shifted away. Um, for me, I see fairness and explainability as part of performance and safety, right? But I think where maybe it comes across as a shift away, or some people might say a deprioritization. It could just be, I mean, things are moving so fast, and every organization has to prioritize what matters to them, right? And with the proliferation of Gen AI tools, it has also meant that the misuse of AI by threat actors have increased. And so you certainly hear a lot of discussions and work around the security of AI applications. Um, I think the bias issues are still very much there, but given the wider range of AI applications and use cases, perhaps in some of them it may not be as critical, or what I've also seen and very happy to see is that uh, the awareness of fairness have increased, and therefore the measures to mitigate against it have become more varied. And some have chosen, for example, to not invest in applications that could lead to biased outcomes, right? And from that perspective, then there wouldn't even be a need to sort of govern those applications. So I think the if we look under the hood, the reality is probably quite varied as to why the language and the focus has so-called shifted.
Hmm. Have you so you've worked with companies that have said this system or this model or whatever has bias issues or it's got some fairness problems and we just aren't going to use it at all?
In the potential use case and application design, yes, we
Hmm.
have worked with
Hmm.
clients who have made that decision.
I think people who try to understand what the assessment process, what kinds of processes are happening, what the outcome of those assessments are. I mean, there's people I think would be very interested to hear about that because there's a lot of concern out there about, you hear the phrase like just checking the box, right? Just,
Mm,
we did this assessment, here's this report, like it says some stuff that we just kind of like put on a shelf and don't think about it anymore. And
mm,
there's a lot of questions about whether or not a system or a model is changed in any way as a result of an assessment process or
mm.
what the actual impact is. And so I think it might be heartening for people to know that there are companies that are, you know, getting an assessment and saying, well, this is we're going to actually take action on this
Yeah,
information that we received, right?
definitely. And I would say the ones who have taken these actions are the organizations that have been able to clearly articulate the intended value of their AI use case from the beginning. So it's not just a governance assessment at the beginning.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that? What do you mean? What are the distinctions there?
So I think if you look at it from a pure governance perspective, I submit a use case application. For example, I would like to use an LM chatbot to support me in my um, HR process to review CV applications, right? Then, okay, I might, look at the data, the model, and then evaluate against my checklist of fairness, explainability, and so on. And stereotypically, over there, you're coming from a risk management, um, cost avoidance mindset. You're avoiding the cost of fines, potential fines. But the moment you bring in your business stakeholder, right? And this could be the HR manager or even the hiring manager who needs to meet the KPI of hiring 10 people within the next quarter. Then you will see that conversation change significantly. And the discussions around fairness, around performance, get a lot more real, right? Because I, as the hiring manager, will need to decide how much risk I want to take with potential bias in this process versus having to meet a very, very real business KPI of hiring another 10 people to fulfill the projects that I need to run for my customer.
Right. So the having a narrow kind of purposeful assessment based on a specific use case is helpful as opposed to somebody saying, "Well, here's this model.
Yes.
We're just going to use it, but like we don't have any real applications that we know we're going to use it
Correct.
for yet." Okay, that's so interesting. Well, this has been a really great talk. Is there anything else that you wanted to say about AI Verify or any of the other things that we talked about?
No, thank you. This has been great, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to reflect as well. I think if I if I can add one last thing, if I had a magic wand, I think what I really hope to see is the continued efforts to make AI governance and testing approaches interoperable across the jurisdictions. whether it's AI Verify, NIST, or the European frameworks. That to me is a key enabler for the AI market to continue to grow, and ultimately for us to enjoy the benefits of the AI technologies.
That is a very bold goal you have. Great talking to you, April Chin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate.
On behalf of World Privacy Forum, I'd like to thank April Chin for taking the time to share her experiences and insights about AI Verify. It's an influential approach to AI governance that we'll be sure to continue watching. Again, if you haven't had a chance to listen to our previous episode, it's a detailed look at the history and evolution of AI Verify, and I really hope you'll check it out. Also, stay tuned for our upcoming full interview with Jason Tamara Wijaya. He's Executive Director of AI at international pharma company MSD. He'll share his thoughts on AI Verify. If you appreciated this talk and maybe you learned something valuable from this episode, I hope you'll subscribe to the Privacy on the Ground podcast to make sure you don't miss future episodes. And as always, please share it with others you think would want to hear it too. I'm Kate Kay. Thanks so much for listening.